Welcome to How It Works, a video series from LawSites in which you get to see hands-on demonstrations of legal tech products directly from the developer. My name is Bob Ambrogi, and today's featured product is Evisort, a leading provider of contract management and AI solutions for legal, procurement, sales, finance, and IT teams. Joining me to tell us about it today is Riley Hawkins, Senior Director of Product. Riley, welcome to How It Works.
Thanks, Bob. I'm just so excited to be here. Love what you guys do and very excited to be talking about Evisort today.
Riley, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do at Evisort.
Yeah, so I am the Senior Director of Product at Evisort, but also I've been fortunate enough to help start Evisort. So I was a founding member. We were started out of Harvard Law School in 2016. A group of lawyers and technologists coming together. We felt the pain and we wanted to build something that could help solve it.
So what is it you wanted to build? Tell us a little bit about the product.
Yeah, I think the best way that I can sum up Evisort is to really break it down into three categories. So one is contract analytics. And I think simply put, turning contracts into data. And there's so much that we uncover when we do that. Cost savings, we expose risk. We also get a lot of information about how to build best-in-class contracting processes going forward, and that feeds into our contract lifecycle management functionality. And then the last piece that I would say, important thing about Evisort is that we act as, for our clients, an operating system, a centralized repository for contracts that can be a fifth system of record that sits in between the other technology solutions that they have.
Great. Anything else you want to tell us about it before you show us how it works, or do you want to launch right into that?
Yeah, I would love to launch right in. I would just say we're very passionate about what we do here at Evisort. As former attorneys, we have reviewed a lot of contracts. We think there's a better way to do it. And in fact, we actually are teaching a class at Harvard Law School now for aspiring attorneys that we think should know that with AI, there's a new way to review contracts that can be more data driven. And so excited to kind of show what that looks like today from a product perspective. I think we can dive in.
Yeah, let's dive in and show us how it works.
All right, let's do it. So I mentioned a second ago that we turn contracts into data, and this is one representation of that as a dashboard. And I think dashboards in and of themselves are not necessarily unique, but how we get here, I think, is very unique. That all the data that I'm showing here on the screen is data that was generated by our artificial intelligence models. What type of contracts do you have? What are the counterparties that you typically enter into agreements with? If there is a change to regulatory law in California, how would you know what companies were impacted? I have a lot of clients that are invoicing on a 30-day standard payment schedule because they don't know what's in their contracts, what they say about payment terms, and they'll negotiate heavily for a 60-day payment term, but then they won't be able to take advantage of that. If they just knew what was in their contracts, that could really impact the bottom line. So a lot of use cases like that, but at the end of the day, getting here can be a challenge for a lot of clients because our AI works totally out of the box at a very high accuracy rate. We're averaging less than 30 days implementation time. And for the analysis, I had a client, 8 to 10,000 agreements. We were able to ingest those into the Evisort platform and give them these exact insights within a couple of hours. That's how fast the AI works. So it's a different approach that we're taking to understanding what are in your historical contracts.
How are clients getting their documents into the platform?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. We actually have a long list of standard integrations. When I talk to clients, they've got contracts everywhere. They've got their sales contracts in Salesforce. Legal may have Google Drive or Box. Procurement teams may use an ERP tool. They may have contracts in email. And so what we provide is a long list of standard integrations that allow folks to, without basically any IT effort, rapidly get contracts into Evisort so that we can start to analyze those contracts.
Fantastic.
And I think the use cases are many, but one thing that we really hone in on with our clients is immediate time to value. Here's an example of a dashboard. I had a client, chief procurement officer at a Fortune 500 company, say, this year, my mandate is to take $1.5 million out of our supply chain. How am I going to do that? And we were able to say, hey, with a couple of data points, we think we can help you get there. And one of those is, well, one, it's great to know when your contracts are coming up for expiration. But even better, if you can hone in on when you can give notice to cancel vendor contracts that otherwise are going to expire or renew out from under you, and you're going to end up paying for services that you don't need. And as people, I think we understand that, and we've all signed up for like a streaming service and a free trial, and then we forget that we did that. We check our credit card statement, and then we're paying for something we don't want. And I think it's safe to say that for our clients, that problem is really exacerbated because of the lack of visibility. They don't know that they have the opportunity to cut costs in that way. But with AI, with dashboards like this, by turning contracts into data, we can uncover a lot of cost savings and help improve supply chain and a lot of other internal business functions.
Yeah, that's really useful.
It would maybe if it'd be helpful, Bob, I'd love to show you how we do that, because I think that is something that is really unique to Evisort, something that I think from an AI perspective wasn't even possible in the last 10 years, but now is the kind of technology that we are using. I mentioned the integrations. That's one way that we get contracts into Evisort. Once we do, and you can also just drag and drop documents into the platform, a lot of scanned PDF documents. I've seen contracts that have 3-hole punches, coffee stains. They've gone through the Xerox machine a couple too many times. So turning a contract like that into data can be challenging. What we do when contracts come into Evisort is, one, we make those documents fully searchable. We use OCR technology to convert those scanned PDFs into searchable text. And then the next thing, and I think this is maybe the most important thing, is that we run 60 plus algorithms on every contract to turn that contract into data. And this is the kind of data that I'm talking about. What type of contract is it? Who are you contracting with? We talked about some of that operational information when I was showing the dashboard. But for example, if you could know when your contracts mention discounts for early payment or volume-based discounts, that's something that our clients spend a lot of time in the negotiating room asking for, but then they don't know where those discounts are so that they can take advantage of them. So with just a handful of data points, we can provide a lot of ROI to our clients, and not just from a supply chain or vendor management perspective, but we also pull out a long list of key clauses from agreements. And so for legal teams that are wondering, like, what is the impact of COVID on our business, looking for contracts or clauses like force majeure, they can find that very easily, and even on contracts that are non-standard. And I think one thing that every attorney will attest to is that no two contracts necessarily look the same. You may have your standard paper, but you probably have a lot of third-party paper as well. And force majeure may not say force majeure. It may say circumstances beyond either party's reasonable control. We've trained our models on over 10 million contracts so that they have, over time, learned to take into account those kinds of contextual clues and ultimately analyze contracts at a high rate of accuracy, regardless of the way that they're formatted or written. Now I want to talk about how we can even go beyond, what the things that we do out of the box. What you're seeing on the screen, I think a lot of folks would say, hey, that resonates. This is the kind of data that we want to track, but inevitably new use cases come up. So, force majeure was the hot thing when COVID first started to really impact companies, a year, 2 years ago. But there will be new things, I think, on a weekly, even daily basis. We have a lot of clients right now that are reeling after the EU handed down a new decision about GDPR. Hey, going forward, if you're going to contract with EU companies, you need new language in your contracts that you didn't have before. And so clients are looking back and saying, hey, which of our contracts reference Privacy Shield? And you need the ability, we think, to be able to teach the AI to go after those new use cases as well. So on a Monday morning, if all of a sudden you have a new use case, that you're not stuck with your existing data model, but you can go in and with a couple of steps, this is about as easy as it gets. Give the system an example, give it a name, click a checkbox, and what the AI will do is it will go across the rest of your contracts historically and look for that similar language. So whether it's looking for contracts that have outdated data privacy language or looking for contracts that mention early termination penalties, we have clients across industries that have very specific use cases to what they do. This technology allows them, even if they're non-technical, to go after and perform that due diligence without having to open and close, tens of thousands of scanned PDF documents.
And it's looking for similar language, not the exact language, right?
That's right. And a great point, Bob, I think, which is, if we looked for exact language, we'd find some things, but we'd miss a lot of important information in those contracts that are non-standard. So all the AI that we use is really going to the meaning of the language as opposed to looking for keywords or phrases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
I want to talk about now what it means to have that data from a reporting perspective. It's great to see it on one contract, but what is really valuable is to be able to go across all of your contracts to look for things like, hey, I want to know all my contracts that are coming up for renewal in the next 30 days or mention termination for convenience. I call this my cost savings search. I can uncover 250 vendor contracts that I could cancel today. And that in and of itself, I think, can justify the cost of a tool like Evisort and provide ROI above and beyond what I think folks even think is possible today. A lot of other use cases as well for legal teams, having the ability to go in and say, with that use case that we mentioned earlier, show me all of the contracts that we have that have outdated data privacy language across not just our vendor contracts, but our customer contracts. If we have employment agreements that mention Privacy Shield or outdated data privacy frameworks, knowing what those are, is being able to take those into a report and then decide how we want to remediate. What we want to do is remove what we did when we were junior associates at law firms, which is review contracts manually, go through each one and copy and paste that information into a spreadsheet or a report. We want that to be something that AI can drive, and then lawyers and folks in procurement and sales can be more strategic and focus on making those best legal and business judgments, as opposed to having to be the ones that go in and pull that data out themselves or spend a lot on outside counsel or overseas service providers to get that information out.
Yeah, very useful.
I think the value of that reporting on your historical contracts is in some ways immediately obvious with some of these use cases. But I think one thing that's not as obvious, I think a lot of clients are thinking more and more about this, is how do we use what we've agreed to in the past to inform what we're going to do going forward. A lot of clients that we see want to start with the contract workflow. And they have, they automate that process, but ultimately they're automating a process that may be broken in certain ways. I think a lot of attorneys would attest to the fact that, what is really slowing down these contract cycles is not necessarily the fact that we don't have a tool in place, but that there are friction points in our negotiation patterns. And I'll give an example. We can tell clients all of the for a specific provision, like indemnification, how often do you have to agree to a non-standard version of that provision? Show me the indemnity provisions that do not contain my standard language. And if that is a high volume of contracts, in this case, 400 agreements, that means that this is a friction point in negotiations. And regardless of the tool that you use, whether it's email or a CLM tool to facilitate that negotiation, this indemnity provision is a problem. It's a sticking point. And it's an invitation, I think, to think about, hey, how do we maybe redesign that provision so it's a little bit more palatable to our clients or to the vendors that we work with? And then let's automate that as a part of CLM.
Does the company have to have developed a playbook in the first place before it even starts using Evisort?
No, Bob. We come to the table with out-of-the-box capabilities across the board, not just on the AI side, but on the workflow side as well. And what you get with Evisort, too, is a deep bench of lawyers. We have over 20 lawyers that work in customer service and implementation roles who are there to advise on how to take advantage of some of this data. Because I think a lot of our clients just have never had this kind of data before. And there's so many applications, and that's where we really come alongside our clients as thought partners to say, hey, this is where we think you should start. Let's understand the historical, and then this is how you can include that, incorporate that into your go-forward processes.
Yeah, great.
I would love to now tell you how we can take all of that historical insight and turn that into workflows in a way that's easy to do, that can actually be owned by legal teams and procurement teams, just the subject matter experts, as opposed to folks in IT. Through our workflow builder tool, clients can build contract workflows for any type of contract that they may have and design each step of that process, starting with the creation of templates. And I think that is, just to close the loop on what we were just talking about, understanding the provisions that get commonly negotiated and what are fallbacks in, that's where contract analytics can provide a lot of value. And I had a client that they like New York governing law. That's their standard. They're a New York company, and so they like to start with that. But they do a lot of business in California too. And what they found when they look back at their contracts was that every time they contracted with a company in California, they were ultimately agreeing to California governing law. It didn't really violate their playbook. It's just that if they had to choose, they'd choose New York. But they were very comfortable with California governing law in those situations. And so after understanding that by looking backwards, they were then able to incorporate that into their template going forward. So they have their standard, which is New York. But then they have a fallback that's for California. And they set up a condition that said, hey, every time we contract with a company that's located in California, let's just go ahead and be proactive and include the California governing law so that we don't lose a day or 2 days or 3 days redlining a provision that should never really be redlined. And so it's understanding that from a historical perspective. And then because this is a no-code tool, those are those conditions, those templates. We'll talk about chains of approval and who has to review the document, how documents get signed, and ultimately where they go, what folder they land in with the right naming convention. All of that can be designed by the teams that own this process. And I had a client that was using sort of a previous generation of tool where they had to go to the vendor with every new change that they wanted to add to their workflow. And so as their business process changed, it was very difficult to make updates, so much so that they changed their logo a few years ago, and the original templates had the old logo. And so the attorneys were generating contracts with the old logo, deleting it, and then copying and pasting in the new logo into the agreement. So just stretching a point to make one maybe, but the idea is that you should, your business is going to change, your templates will change, and you need the ability to have a tool like this that is as easy to use as setting up a baby shower on Facebook. It's all click, no code, and you can rapidly make updates to it as your business changes. I'd love to talk about, after you build your workflows, what does that look like from a user experience perspective? Mm-hmm. And a very common user of this workflow tool on the front end is sales teams. And Evisort, that's why Evisort has a Salesforce integration with its workflow tool, because it's not just legal. Like, sales can really benefit from having automation in the workflow process because it can speed up their sales cycles, but they don't want to live in any other tool other than Salesforce. And I think that's fair. And we don't want to have folks have to go through some major change management process to take advantage of all the great functionality that's in Evisort. And so we can connect to Salesforce. So as a salesperson, instead of ever having to log into Evisort, I can say, hey, I need a new contract. It's an NDA. I need it to move my deal forward. And I can actually request that contract directly from Evisort, or I can upload a document that I got from a third party. And that then workflow gets kicked off in Evisort, and legal can take advantage of all the redlining and collaboration features that Evisort has to get that contract over the signature line. But as a salesperson, I can stay up to date on my contract in Salesforce. And I think a lot of salespeople otherwise feel like they have to hunt down legal and send emails every day. Hey, where's my contract? Is it in negotiation? Where is it? When is it going out for signature? With this, they can know where their contract is in the process, who's working on it. And then if it has been waiting for a long time, then they can get involved in the process. But that transparency is I think what a lot of sales teams are hungry for. And I think with the integration, we're able to provide a seamless experience for them while letting legal do their thing with all of Evisort's really best-in-class CLM capabilities.
That's great. What about capabilities for collaboration and redlining?
Yeah, and this is where I, as a lawyer, our legal team, a lot of lawyers on our product team get really excited about this feature because they're used to the old way of doing things. Whether or not a contract gets started in Evisort or through Salesforce, we'll enter certain information to make sure that contract gets generated correctly. We have that best first draft right out of the gate. And then what we do is we route that document immediately for review by the legal team. And that's what this screen looks like here is, hey, contract is generated. Now it goes to review, and this becomes a hub for our clients that need to collaborate internally between legal, sales, IT to get that contract over the signature line. You asked about redlining and collaboration, Bob. So first things first, let's make sure the document is getting to the right people who will collaborate on the document together. Maybe it's sales, maybe it's finance, maybe it's legal. And instead of having that in email, we can have a single hub for that. And that document that we just generated, we can open up a portal. This portal here is designed to let teams work together on a document. It's designed to allow them to easily share an agreement with a counterparty. So from once we have that first draft, send that document out to the counterparty. The counterparty will do its thing. They will mark up that document. They will make changes to it from a redline perspective. They'll probably do it in Word because that's what most folks are used to using if they're not using a tool like Evisort. And then we can take that document and we can upload it into Evisort. And we can actually automatically generate red lines on the agreement. So every change, whether the client was nice enough to use track changes or whether they weren't, and maybe some of those things are hidden. But from a user perspective, you can just immediately see the things that changed from version 1 to version 2 and start taking action on those from here. And not just responding to red lines, but any other edit that you need to make to the contract. So I click this edit button. It will launch me into a collaboration portal. And what I love about this is that it looks and feels just like Microsoft Word. It has that familiarity. And I think for the folks that we work with that have been working in Word for decades sometimes, that familiarity is huge, that they have a toolbar that looks similar, that they can add comments the way that they're used to in a document. They can change the font and the layout. They can jump from one red line to the next in a familiar fashion. But I think a lot of folks wish that they could do that in a way that was collaborative with their teammates in a way that's similar to Google Docs, right? I think Google Docs has mastered that sort of collaboration element, having multiple people in a document at once. As a lawyer, I can be working on the legal T's and C's while somebody in finance works on the commercial terms. We've really brought together the best of both worlds here because in addition to this looking and feeling just like Microsoft Word, I can also be in here with my teammates and they can be working on different parts of the contract. We can be working on it together. We don't have to worry about version confusion. As we make changes, they're auto-saved. And when we're ready, we can save this down as a new version and get it back to the client, I think, with these features in record time.
Yeah, that's great. Combining the best of both worlds there, as you say.
Yeah, I think it's about time that lawyers got the benefit of some of these tools that maybe other industries and personas have had for a while. One last thing I want to point out, I think it's really important. When we talk about redlining and collaboration, everyone wants those features, but I think they really become powerful in conjunction with the other tools that we have from a contract analytics perspective. So let's say somebody changed your termination provision and they're asking for termination for convenience. A counterparty wants termination for convenience, and I don't know how exactly I should respond. And I think for lawyers, we talk about this word precedent in the context of litigation. Every lawyer knows what precedent means in that context, and no litigation attorney would litigate a case without looking at some of the previous decisions that happened and relying on that precedent as they start to build their strategy. But as a transactional attorney in the contracts world, we rarely take advantage of precedent. And I think it's a lot to do with the fact that data, that information isn't readily available. And so when I'm in a situation like this, the counterparty has pushed back on one of my key provisions, I can actually leverage Evisort's analyzer tool on the contract analytics side to say, hey, have we agreed to termination for convenience in the last year in a services agreement, and know exactly who we've agreed to that with and examples of the language that we ended up agreeing to. And as a lawyer, this is huge because now I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can see what was approved in the past. I can see if when we agree to termination for convenience, maybe we ask for a 60-day notice period, or maybe we ask for an early termination penalty. And if I find a clause that I like, and now maybe I remember, yeah, we did do this with company ABC last year, I can grab that language and I can plug it right into my contract here. So what would have taken me a long time to respond before is now something that I can do in a couple of seconds. and feel good about it, even increase my bargaining position. If I'm negotiating with a large telecom company and I look back and I look at what we've agreed to with telecom companies before, and I notice that we've never given termination for convenience, maybe I just push back on that. And even as a small company, that gives me leverage against some of the large counterparties that I work with.
Riley, why don't you kind of sum it up for us? I mean, what's the value that Evisort brings to its customers?
To sum up, I think a lot of what we've talked about today would be to say, when you think about doing contracting, you need to think about one, what have we agreed to in the past? And Evisort provides that contract analytics to turn your historical contracts into data. But you also want an end-to-end solution where you can take advantage of that with best-in-class contract lifecycle management functionality like redlining and like in-platform editing. And then finally, you want that single source of truth for your contracts, that repository of agreements. So everything that goes through workflow and everything that's historical is in one combined solution that can connect to other tools that you have like Salesforce, like the ERP tools that you might use. And those three things are what we think you have to have today to have a true contract intelligence platform that can work for your business.
Riley Hawkins, thanks so much for this very informative overview of Evisort. Really appreciate your taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much, Bob. It was fun walking you through it and looking forward to giving you more updates on Evisort in the future.
I look forward to it. That's it for this episode of How It Works. This is Bob Ambrogi. You can find the full series at my blog, lawsitesblog.com, or on YouTube, search for How It Works. Until next time, thanks for watching.